Tonight on Nova, the television event of the season. From the photographer who first captured the miracle of life, a stunning new special airing over 3 nights, Odyssey of Life. The daring vision of Leonard Nielsen opens our minds, changes the way we see, taking us on a grand journey into the tiniest of miracles. In part 1, Nielsen's pioneering microphotography goes inside the human body. Join us as sperm meets egg and sets off on the ultimate journey. Nova is funded by Merck and by Prudential, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and viewers like you.
It is the most familiar of all miracles. Life from the inside. A human embryo growing within the womb. Each of us has made this same journey, beginning with an egg cell. 23 chromosomes lie within, half of our genetic inheritance. The egg cell travels through the fallopian tube. Millions of cilia hairs move it along. There's a frantic rush of sperm. And then egg and sperm perform the dance of life. Each sperm carries its own half set of chromosomes. But only one sperm out of 500 million is allowed through the egg membrane. Then the barrier closes. The fertilized egg now has 2 nuclei seen in the center. When the nuclei fuse, they bring together the chromosomes of both parents, completing the set. A day later, cell division begins. Within a few hours, there are 4 cells. Which become 8 cells, which divide in turn again and again. After 6 days, the ovum has developed into a blastocyst. Each cell is slowly acquiring its own specialized function. When the blastocyst enters the uterus, it floats delicately down to the surface. It is here, along the uterine lining, that the next stage of growth begins. When the blastocyst has found a suitable place to settle, it must protect itself from the immune system of its own mother. It secretes an enzyme, seen here as blue crystals, a signal to the mother that the blastocyst is no intruder. Instead, it's something to be protected. Here, cell division continues, a process that doesn't end until we die. At 3 weeks, the embryo is just 1/10 of an inch long. But by 5 weeks, it has quadrupled in length. The head is bent down to the right above the placenta. At 7 weeks, the embryo is about an inch long. The limb buds and the umbilical cord have taken shape. At 12 weeks, the hands and feet have already formed. At 16 weeks, the fetus is nearly 6 inches long, and the ears and closed eyelids can be easily seen. By 19 weeks, all its features are clearly defined. Although we pride ourselves on our uniqueness, can we even tell which one of these embryos is human? It takes weeks of growth before the answer is obvious. As we grow, we reveal a remarkable link with other species. A link that not only explains our individual development, but also the development of life itself. Consider this 6-week-old human embryo. Now compare it with this embryo at a similar age. What looks like a human hand is actually the front foot of a pig. And this hand-like limb is really the nascent wing of a chicken. Our hands, their feet and wings, sharing a common ancestry that binds together all animals with backbones. Evolution has taken a simple blueprint and, over eons, built one variation after another, including ourselves. Evolution's principal mechanism is natural selection. Sudden genetic changes called mutations sometimes lead to new features in different groups of individuals. Animals that become better adapted to their environment because of these features have a better chance of survival. These better adapted individuals then pass on to their offspring the features that gave them an advantage in the first place, until, eventually, the entire species is altered or a new species is created. From a bird to a panther, evolution has worked its magic. Evolution began nearly 4 billion years ago, when meteors still bombarded a stark and tortured Earth. Somehow, this small, hostile planet came to provide the only known home for life in all the universe. Although we don't know how life began, liquids, gases, and minerals must have supplied the building blocks. Then, the first self-replicating molecules were formed, most likely in the primordial sea. Over hundreds of millions of years, these molecules reproduced themselves, adapting to their environment and growing more complex. They formed the first template of life, from which everything else evolved. By 3.5 billion years ago, more advanced one-celled organisms had developed. These blue-green algae are still with us today. They joined together in colonies, forming microscopic strings drifting with the current. For the next few billion years, one-celled organisms were the only life forms on Earth. They grew more diverse and even invented a new means of reproduction, which we call sex. They also produced oxygen, making possible a myriad of new organisms as the Earth's atmosphere slowly changed. A more sophisticated cell structure was at the heart of this revolution. Primitive organisms may have joined together to create this new type of cell. The result was a cell with a nucleus and other specialized organs called organelles. These gave cells the crucial ability to take on different shapes and functions. One of the most important organelles may have been the ancestors of these bacteria. Joining with the cell, they may have become mitochondria, which produce the cell's energy. Here, the mitochondria are red almond-shaped organs. $250,000 of them, placed end to end, would stretch only an inch, but their tiny size belies their importance. Inside are structures resembling the parts of a car battery with a similar function. Miniature power plants traveling through the cell. Another type of bacteria may have given organisms the ability to move under their own power. The ancestors of the spirochetes may have evolved into cilia hairs. Cilia encircle an organism like tiny legs. They allow it to move about and catch its food. They even help it perform curious rhythmic exercises. The next great evolutionary leap occurred less than 1 billion years ago when multi-celled organisms appeared in the ocean. Single-cell organisms living together in colonies may have been the first to make the transition. It was the lighting of a slow fuse that would one day cause an explosion of life. A dazzling array of new species appeared about 500 to 600 million years ago. All of today's animals are descended from the sea creatures of this era. The sea is our ancestral home. But not every species survived from that time. Far from it. Here are some of the losers in the struggle we call evolution. Now, mere fossilized remains. Those species that could not compete successfully, or adapt to changing environments, or had the bad luck to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, were doomed to extinction. The next great evolutionary change occurred about 400 million years ago. Ancient relatives of this lungfish developed the ability to breathe air and crawled onto the land. Today's reptiles evolved from those first land vertebrates who learned how to survive out of the water. But other species would later reverse the process. A land predator resembling a dog began an extraordinary return to the sea 50 million years ago. The result was the dolphin and the whale. This is the skull of that land-based predator, and this is how we think its shape changed during its adaptation to aquatic life. The nose hole moved up along the head, and the teeth grew smaller to accommodate a diet of fish. So the sea got something back for the life it lost. Mammals breathing air and nourishing their young with milk. The sea has kept its hold even on the mammals that stayed on land. We humans spend our first 9 months in the salty water of the amniotic sac. We grow in a vestige of the primordial ocean, which the first land vertebrates brought with them. The same is true of this chicken embryo inside the egg. The hard shell protecting it was an evolutionary adaptation, developed during the transition from water to land. Everywhere we look in the embryonic world, we find links to a common past beneath the sea. We are still linked to evolutionary changes that occurred underwater hundreds of millions of years ago. Changes that seem to have nothing to do with us, like the development of gills in fish. Placed behind the head, the first gills consisted of a number of arches through which blood flowed. Oxygen in the water could then pass through the arch's membranes into the bloodstream. In time, some of the gill arches were adapted to serve other uses. The need to digest food more efficiently or become a better hunter led to the creation of a more highly developed mouth. Mouth that could also serve as a formidable weapon. The first sign of gills appears in fish embryos at a very early stage. Here, the gill arches can be seen on the left. But before the gills mature, the fish embryo receives its oxygen from tiny arteries in the membrane of the yolk sac, which functions like a human placenta. And even more remarkably, we have the precursor to gills in an early stage of our development. The arches, visible below the head, look a bit like a mouth. They appear in the 4th week, and for a few days, develop in the same way as gills. But after 2 weeks or so, they veer off in another direction entirely. Instead of becoming respiratory organs, they develop into the lower jaw, the larynx, and the middle ear. The same traces of aquatic life can be found in other creatures that have left the sea far behind. This chick sways in its own private ocean. Like the human embryo, the chick also has the precursor to gills. They're visible here as small bubbles on the throat. But a few days later, they're gone. Life in the primordial ocean continues to echo through the eons. Even our spine may trace its origins to an animal without one, the ancient sea squirt. There's a curious resemblance between its eggs and ours at the moment of fertilization. There's also a resemblance between sea squirt larvae and a small vertebrate. Although the adult sea squirt has no spine, its larva has a spine-like cord in its tail. As the larva grows, it loses the tail, then develops into the adult sea squirt. But what if a mutation kept a sea squirt in the larval stage all its life, thus keeping the tail intact? In that case, this minute spine-like structure could have been passed on to future generations. The next evolutionary step was probably the inch-long amphioxus, which may have developed the precursor to the modern spine. You can see it here as a narrow yellow cord that runs along its back, a bit to the right. From this unassuming beginning came the 60-foot-long backbone of the mighty blue whale. And the backbone of the even mightier dinosaur. Our spine is a bit more modest. This is how it looks in the uterus at 4 weeks. The spinal segments are already shaped, but still microscopic. At 5 weeks, there's a cleavage in the back running down the center. But by 6 weeks, the cleavage has closed and the spine is embedded inside the body. In this chicken embryo, we can still see segments of the early backbone, which will develop into the spine and muscles. But the end of one spine is not always the end of another. This is the tale of a pig embryo after just 3 weeks, developing along with the spine. And here's the tale 2 weeks later. This chick embryo also shows signs of a tail in its early development, even though the tail disappears a few days later. But what about us humans? This 4-week-old human embryo has the beginning of a tail, to the right. Like the gill arches of our aquatic ancestors, vestiges of the tail appear in all of us. But by the 6th week, the tail is only a small bud at the end of the spine. And by 7 weeks, all that's left is a little bulge below the legs. All animals without tails remain linked with those that have them. No matter how different our final form, we are all bound together by a common past, on the land and in the water. Even this tiny fish embryo can reveal secrets about our evolution. The development of arms and legs from fins. The process began eons ago, perhaps with the ancestors of this living fossil, the coelacanth. Its advanced fins may have provided the template for the development of limbs in the first land-based animals. The coelacanth has changed little over millions of years. This fossilized relative swam the oceans about 400 million years ago. By examining the bone structure of its fins, we can find clues to the evolution of legs and claws. With the help of computer animation, we can make the fish come alive again. We can see how the different bones in the front fins may have been modified over time until they developed into a new kind of limb useful for life on land. The animal that bore the fruits of this evolutionary change was an amphibian. The transition took place about 350 million years ago. This is the world in which the creature lived. In time, the limbs of these early amphibians developed further into longer legs with toes and claws. Land-based animals, the reptiles and mammals, eventually followed. Reptiles were especially successful adapting to their environment. They gained more powerful legs for walking and running. most renowned of all were the dinosaurs, who dominated the Earth for more than 200 million years. Their limbs have never been equaled in size. "65 million years after the last dinosaur died, this same evolutionary blueprint still serves animals today. No matter where we are on the river of time, we will always find a literal embodiment of the distant past. Evolution reveals itself both in the fins of fish and the hands and feet of fishermen. The buds which form our limbs can already be seen in this 5-week-old embryo. This is the arm bud, as yet nearly identical to the leg bud to the right. And this is the embryo 10 days later. The buds are now paddle-shaped and increasingly different from each other. But even at this stage, it's still hard to tell a human arm from this front leg of a pig. And the similarity between the limb buds of this bird embryo and the human embryo is equally extraordinary. The left bud looks more like a human arm than the wing it will one day be. The development of wings may have begun with this small, swift dinosaur called Compsognathus. It took millions of years, but eventually the construction of its forelimb changed shape. The result was a wing with a light skeleton covered by feathers. And this is where it led to the first known bird called Archaeopteryx. Long after the dinosaurs disappeared, their relatives remained to fill the skies. We can still see traces of the dinosaurs in birds. Even a bird embryo shows us how evolution could turn a limb into a wing. Here, the wing still resembles an arm. As it develops further, it even looks like a human hand. From this point on, the wing will grow until it's fully formed, diverging more and more from the hand. But before it does, the resemblance remains uncanny. As for us, by the 6th week of life, our hands are well on their way to their final shape. Our genetic program, born of evolution, is guiding their development. To create a hand, our genes must tell certain cells to grow and others to stop at each and every stage. When the cells between the fingers are programmed to die, the shape of the hand is revealed. This embryo is in its 7th week. By the 15th week, even the fingernails are clearly visible. There are many variations, but always the same basic process. In a bat's wing, the cells are programmed to grow until a membranous skin forms between the fingers. And so each and every species follows its own evolutionary path from a common beginning until it acquires more and more of its own special characteristics. The chicken embryo in its journey to birth. The pig embryo, from a human-like appearance to its ultimate form. The fish embryo, growing along an evolutionary path far from ours. And finally, the human embryo. This is the Odyssey of life as it continues in the egg or the womb over weeks or months. This is the Odyssey of life as it reflects the course of evolution in days instead of millennia. This, too, is the Odyssey of life, as it takes us back toward the beginning of the path. And this is our Odyssey. At 4 weeks, a cleavage holds our first nerve cells. At 5 weeks, gill arches form structures that will shape the face. At 6 weeks, the eyes appear, and the limb buds look like paddles. They grow into the center of the body. At 8 weeks, the head is rounder. The eyes have moved closer and the fingers have appeared. At 11 weeks, the growing brain helps to shape the head. The eyelids have formed. At At 18 weeks, the child-to-be has begun to appear. The bird, the pig, the fish, the human, all ending up in very different places. In fact, by 18 weeks, the human fetus looks like no other group of animals, except one. And therein lies the final proof of our evolutionary past. You are looking at a chimpanzee fetus in its mother's womb. The chimp and gorilla are more closely related to us than to any other species on Earth. They resemble us more than they do the orangutan. Chimps and humans share more than 98% of the same genes. This is an ape fetus in the 11th week. And this is a human at the same stage. During the development of both, very little distinguishes one from the other. Here is the ape fetus. And here is the human. The hands of the ape fetus. The hands of the human. Only an expert can tell them apart. Here are the ape's feet at 7 weeks. And here are the humans. This is the ape fetus a few weeks later. And this is the human. In some ways, the ape fetus bears a closer resemblance to a fully grown human than to a fully grown ape. Are these the hands of a human fetus or an ape? If you guessed human, you're wrong, but not alone. In evolutionary terms, it was only yesterday that we both belonged to the same species. Just a few million years ago in Africa. Then we became the upright walking animals that would one day spread across the world. How did humans diverge from the early apes? There are many theories, but one suggests that we owe our existence to an ape that remained in the juvenile stage of development. Consider the fetal development of both species. At 18 weeks, the ape's foot diverges from the human's. It comes to resemble a hand more than a foot. After birth, the ape's foot has become an impressive tool for gripping, unlike ours. Another curious fact is the ape's appearance. A juvenile can look more like a human than its own mother. But when it matures, it leaves those childish features behind. Even the growth of our brains may be linked to the differences between the two species' embryonic development. In the end, our brain becomes 3 times larger than the brain of an adult chimpanzee. But in the womb, our brain and head remain in a more immature state, so that after birth, they can keep growing. The chimp's brain is more fully developed at birth, and the growth is much more limited. Sometimes, it seems, immaturity pays off. And so the Odyssey of life reflects the path of evolution itself. The journey of each of us reflects the journey of our species. This is how we all begin our lives. This is how we embody the Odyssey of life. A new member of the human family has just arrived.
Hello. Hi.
Oh, kids, go and look at your sister. Hi,
She
sweetheart.
loves
Are
me.
you tired?
Come, look at the baby. Isn't she nice?
Whatever the individual differences between us, we are but one species that has followed the same basic path through time. We are all the children of evolution. It's a long journey from the fertilization of the egg 9 months before our birth. But it's only a fraction of the ultimate journey of evolution. Science is demonstrating that we are but one small part of a much greater Odyssey, and that our part is inextricably linked to all of life.
Take a closer look at the technology that's given us a closer look at ourselves. Zoom in to Nova online at pbs.org. To order this show for $19.95 plus shipping and handling, call 1-800-255-9424. And to learn more about how science can solve the mysteries of our world, ask about our many other Nova videos. Tomorrow night on Nova, bloody battles, sinister traps, a throbbing heart, a loving kiss. See the world as you've never seen it before. Odyssey of Life, Part 2, The Unknown World. Nova is a production of WGBH Boston.